Hello, my name is Rachel, and I am speaking with two-time Olympic gold medalist and former captain of the Canadian national women's hockey team, Cassie Campbell-Pascall. Cassie played professional hockey from 1993 to 2006 and collected 21 medals during her career. She is the only captain, male or female, to lead her team to two-time gold at the Olympic level. Upon retiring from hockey, Cassie went into broadcasting, where she was the first female color commentator for Hockey Night in Canada. She now works for Rogers Sportsnet as an analyst. Cassie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
So let's just dive right in. I was wondering if you could share with us your concussion experience.
Yeah, I think I had probably at least 3 or 4 documented concussions over my hockey career, and when I grew up playing you didn't even hear the word concussion. You didn't kind of know about it, so I probably don't actually know how many I had. But over my national team career, where we were more educated on concussions and we had the medical professionals around us on a regular basis, I probably had about 3 or 4, and one that was pretty serious that kept me out of the game for about 7 or 8 months, and also led to a neck injury. So yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of part of the game, and it's a safe game, I think, hockey. But sometimes, especially at the elite level, you do get some injuries from time to time.
Absolutely. Can you kind of walk us through what that recovery was like, particularly when you had that more severe concussion with the accompanying spinal injury?
Yeah, I think initially when it happened, it was in a championship game, and I remember coming back off the ice and sitting on the bench and knowing something was really wrong. And of course, you're playing in the championship game, and unfortunately, I made the decision to go back and continue to play the rest of the game. And so I just I ended up going to see a neurologist about 2 days later, and again, concussions were still relatively new as far as information at that point, and I had a neck injury that went along with that concussion. So it was sort of that frustration of, is this a concussion or is this a neck injury? And sometimes the symptoms can be quite similar. And so, just going through that physio, and I, had to take a good 6 weeks off with no exercise and doing nothing, and then gradually kind of work my way back. And unfortunately, I went back about 3, 4 months later and re-injured the neck. So I knew that I wasn't able to kind of play full time until I had my neck 100% strong, because then I was more susceptible to concussions. So it ended up being about an 8 month recovery. And I don't think it's something, you ever recover from, because the neck injury involved the spinal cord. And I think with concussions, you're never fully the same person again. But, I was able to go back and play in my last Olympics. And so that was a blessing. And I, made my overall body strength and core strength and neck strength stronger, so that I was able to come back to play. But it's definitely a frustrating process, because it changes daily how you feel sometimes. And you can have a good day and you think you're on the right track, and then all of a sudden you have a bad day. So it's just something that you have to be really patient with.
Absolutely. Um, did you find that when you were recovering from your concussion, it was difficult to put into words what you were feeling?
Yeah, I think so. And I think at the time, you know, people were understanding concussions, but they were sort of like, really, is it that bad? And it was just kind of wishy-washy, if you will, as far as what the symptoms were and how long they could last and how severe they could be. And so I think it it was just one of those frustrating things where again, the symptoms kind of change every single day, and they get better and then they get worse. And so I knew that it was hard to explain to people what I was going through. And and I think a lot of people around me, I was lucky that I had good medical people around me, that they were trying to be really understanding. But I think when it ended up being an 8 month injury, that was hard to kind of explain to the coaching staff, and why it was taking me so long, and then to come back and then get re-injured again. And but I was lucky to have really good people around me.
Of course, that's it makes all the difference. It really does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, did you feel any pressure internally or externally to return to hockey after your injuries?
Well, I think internally for sure. I mean, I was, at the latter part of my career, and so I knew that fitness wise, and as you get older as an athlete, it's more difficult to take time off. You got these young kids coming to take your spot. So I think internally, I really, wanted to get back. And, unfortunately this kind of happened the year before my last Olympic year. So I knew the importance of that year and the training and everything else that went with it. And then externally, I think a little bit, I think because it was an injury that's hard to describe, it's hard to see. I think sometimes, you walk into a rink and you look like you're feeling fine, you look like you're normal, but you're not normal. And so I think there's a little bit of pressures on both sides as far as internal and external pressure when dealing with concussions.
And so when you did go back, did you feel anxious, scared, or any other feelings of fear about injuring yourself again? Or were you just excited to get back and finish on a high note?
When I went back for my first practice, I asked arguably the toughest defenseman on our team to do one-on-one battles with me, and I felt that if I could survive Colleen's Historics, who was a great Team Canada defender and strong and physical, and I felt like if I could survive one-on-one battles with her, that I could survive the test of playing a hockey game. And so I went to my teammate and I just said, "Hey, I need you to practice today. And every one-on-one drill we do, every battle drill we do, I need you to go up against me, and I need you to cross-check me, and I need you to be hard." And she would have done that anyway, I think. But she really, she took that role pretty serious, and she knew why I needed it. And I remember, after the first battle drill with her, and everyone's kind of looking at me to see, what was going on and if I was okay. And we both just started kind of laughing. And I was like, I survived. I survived Colleen's Historic, so I can play, And she probably doesn't realize how much that meant to me. And but that was sort of my approach. I felt like I'm going to take on the toughest defender in our team and get her to put me through the paces. And if I'm strong enough and I'm ready to be back, then that'll be my proof. And that was my proof. And I never looked back after that, so it was good.
That's wonderful. It's nice to know that your team was also really wanting you to be well enough to play, but also keeping that eye on you and making sure that they were supporting you.
Yeah, no, it was. I think that's one thing about playing a team sport is that people do really support you and want you to be better. And we're always trying to push each other to be better. And and also at the same time, they all understood what I was going through and how much time I had to take off and how frustrating it was to not always be around them in training and playing. But they were always supportive, and I was lucky to have that.
That's great. So, going back to the specifics of your concussion, besides the physical injuries, what other effects did you feel?
Well, I think I truly believe that when you have a concussion, it's like a little piece of you disappears and it never returns. And whether that's from the nerves and the neurology side of everything. But I honestly think you're never the same. You're just never the same person. It's like a little piece of you goes missing. And it's not like a depression, and maybe it is, I don't know, but it's just like a little piece of your personality changes. And I'm still kind of a fun loving and like to have a good time kind of person, but I think after having a major concussion, a little bit of that goes away. And you go through sort of ups and downs emotionally, and you wonder if it's depression. You wonder what's wrong with me on a constant basis. And headaches and different things. And just not feeling right, just not, especially as an athlete, your body so well. If your knees, something's going on with your knee or your alignment in your hip, or, I mean, you can just read your body so well. And with a concussion in an athlete, you just know something's wrong and you just can't describe it. You can't put your finger on it. But you know that it's not right to go back and play at 100%. And so it's kind of hard sometimes to describe, the symptoms and to describe what you're going through, because again, it just changes every single day. And especially, when you have your first major one, and they're all major, but when, for me, it was a pretty significant concussion that it also involved my spinal cord and my neck. And, there's just so many things emotionally that you go through, and the ups and downs, and the mood swings, and the physiological, pain in your shoulders and your traps as they try to, keep everything together. And just how it affects your whole mindset, your whole body. And That's the thing about the brain is if you injure your brain, it affects your baby toe. It affects just everything about you, um, and you just don't feel quite right. So it's kind of hard to put symptoms on concussions, and because I think it's different for everyone, and I think it changes, every day while you're dealing with it.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great way to describe it. And it's in line with what other people have spoken about publicly with concussion is that it's the reason that so few people are aware of it is that you can't put it into words.
Yeah, it's definitely hard.
Absolutely. Do you find today, years after your concussion, that there are still lingering effects?
Well, I think my neck injury, I still have lingering effects, and I bruised the spinal cord uh, from C4 to C5, C6 area, and so I don't think that ever heals. Once you bruise your spinal cord, that never heals. So I do deal with some sort of trap issues, and sometimes some nerve issue where I'll get a bag under my eye, and it's not just because I'm tired. You can tell it's definitely nerve issue, and I'm fortunate that I don't get a lot of headaches, which is great, and I think I've healed in that sense. But I think more so now, some of the issues that I face are that your brain is never quite the same, and like I mentioned earlier, a little piece of you is always gone. So you recognize that and you know that, but now it's more physical for me, and just keeping my shoulder strength and my upper back strength, and keeping things stable so that I'm not susceptible to a future concussion, whether it's playing with my daughter on a trampoline or out on the ice with the kids or whatever the case may be. Just kind of maintaining some balance and some core fitness, I think, is important.
Absolutely. So now that it's been a few years since your concussions and the professional hockey leagues, both male and female, are more aware of the damages of playing too soon after a concussion, do you think there's been a lot of positive change in those leagues?
I do. I think just awareness is key. I think as an athlete, awareness is key. We want to play through everything, and but I think more and more athletes are starting to understand you can't play through concussions, and you have to be more upfront. And I really like what the NHL's doing, and it's not 100% perfect, but having the concussion spotter where if a player's hit to the head, he's got to come out of the game, and that's just the reality. And so it's just I think there's been some great steps. I think there's still so much more information out there about concussions and how they happen and all those types of things. And I still think we need to do a better job. But I think there has been some little steps made and just awareness, and I think that's been key.
So, speaking of doing things better, are there any misconceptions about concussions that you think should be cleared up?
Well, I think the first thing is, that a concussion doesn't necessarily have to arise from, a direct hit to the head or the jaw. You could get hit on your shoulder and just not recognize it's coming, and kind of can be jarred the wrong way. And sometimes incidental contact can create a concussion, and it doesn't necessarily arise from big physical contact and all those types of things. And then I think the second thing is that as we get more awareness with concussions, I think more and more parents are becoming a little bit more nervous about putting their kids in sport, and I think that's a shame. Because we're more aware about concussions, we can understand that if one of our children faces it, we can take them out of the game, we can take them out longer, because we have more awareness. We think that minor sport isn't safe, and I actually think with awareness, it's never been more safer. And sports, and I think it's important in the values that she's learning that are going to make her become a better adult. And so even though we do have more concussion awareness, I still believe that parents shouldn't feel deterred about putting their kids in minor sport. I still think the value is high to have your kids play sport, and concussion awareness actually makes those sports even safer.
Mm, wonderful. And I wanted to ask you about the decision you made in, I believe it was 2018, to donate your brain along with other female athletes to concussion research. What brought you to that decision, and why do you think this is important?
I worked a long time talking about concussions. I remember doing an event with Jason Spezza even before he was in the NHL. We were, I think it was Dr. Tom Pashby. We were doing some stuff with, and so I've always kind of been ahead of the curve as far as knowing what a concussion was and understanding it. And then I did some work with Dr. Charles Tatter, and he came to me and he asked me if I would donate my brain. They don't have a lot of female brains, and I don't think they had very many at all. And so I kind of got the details around it, and I was like, what if my daughter needed a piece of my brain down the road in science? And I said I want to make sure that she has access to it first, obviously. And but there hadn't been a lot of female brains donated, and especially here in Canada. So to be the first three athletes, myself and Karen Lee Gartner and Jen Kish, and they're both friends of mine. And when Dr. Charles Tatter asked me, I said, hey, I don't mind doing it, but can I get some more for you? I wanted it to be sort of a group effort, and that would have a lot more impact. So Jen Kish joined it, and so did Karen Lee Gartner. And Karen, dealt with concussions more so post career, and also probably during her career, and she didn't even know. And then Jen Kish, during her career, dealt with concussions, and so it was an honor to have them involved with me. And and hopefully I don't have to donate my brain anytime soon. I plan to have it in my head for a long time, but I'm just excited to be part of that movement, and I think it's important that we have more female research done, and so I'm excited to be a little part of that.
Wonderful. And I also hope that doesn't happen for a long time,
Yeah.
but it's nice to know that people like you are committing to furthering concussion research in Canada.
Yeah, it's been fun to kind of learn a little bit more about it behind the scenes. And it was an easy decision for me, to be honest. I just wanted sort of that clause in the contract, if you will, that if my daughter ever needed it, that she has first dibs. But yeah, that it makes sense to me, and I'm proud to be part of that movement.
Wonderful. And my final question for you today is, do you have any advice for Canadians who are currently dealing with the effects of concussion?
Well, I think to understand that it's real, and it's a real phenomenon, it's a real injury, it's a real thing. And even though you can't see it, it's there. And I think sometimes, people with concussions, they kind of feel like they're alone. They're like, well, why can't I get over this? And I don't understand, like, why am I not getting better? And I need to push through it. And you start to question the symptoms that you're having and why you're having them. And is it really a concussion, or am I just down, or is it depression? Is it all these things? And to understand that those questions are normal, and that you're normal, and that the symptoms you're feeling are normal, and that there's so many people out there that you can reach out to get the information you need. And to talk to your family doctor. And when the symptoms persist, talk to your family doctor again. And maybe go see someone on the sports side or injury side that can really help you. And to reach out to people, reach out and talk to people. I'm still feeling this way. I don't understand. And why am I not getting better? And so to reach out to people, and to make sure that you don't feel like you're alone dealing with it, because so many people have gone through it. And it's a real injury, and so you need to treat it just like as if it's a broken leg. And it sometimes takes a lot more time to heal than a broken leg, but it's a real injury. And it's important to make sure it's 100% healed before you move forward.
That is excellent advice. Well, thank you so much, Cassie, for sharing your experience with us today.
No, thanks for having me, Rachel.
Of course. And for more information about acquired brain injury, or to find your local brain injury association, please visit www.braininjurycanada.ca.